The medic student pulls the knife out, senior medic loses his mind, student freaks out and puts the knife back in. How have you seen a person's life be ruined in a single day? We had extended family together for a holiday and everyone was making jokes about how my cousin was late. His mom and dad were involved in the jokes, texting him being upset about how he was late and all. Turns out, someone hit him in a head-on collision on his way over and he died on impact. The police knocked on the door to notify the family like in a movie. I'll never forget watching the family crumple to the ground. An 18-year-old tried to steal a couple bottles of Hennessy from my store. When I confronted him, he swung the bottle at my head and connected. I rolled with the blow so it didn't do much damage. Charged with assault and robbery by my company. Violent crimes offender and lost custody of his baby. I was working in a bank. One day the director fired one of his executives. The whole "empty your desk, you're fired" speech in front of everyone. The director was furious and the guy seemed entirely destroyed. Then he explains to all that this guy gave his login and password to a friend in another branch. The friend used that login, and others, while doing some kind of credit card fraud. Police arrested her, but lacked evidence against the fired guy. So they just fired him on the spot. Obviously, besides losing his job, he was also blacklisted to work in banks or finance. I play poker. I once saw a man on my way in betting about 10K all on one roulette spin. He chose red, and lost. He looked defeated. Later that night, a guy at our table told us that he heard the guy on the phone crying in the parking lot trying to explain to his wife that he lost their money. She was screaming and said she wants a divorce. I was working with a guy, 16, one day when he gets a phone call. His dad, mom, brother and sister had gone to pick up the new family car. His dad took a corner too fast and drove straight into the underside of a bridge. Guy lost his entire family in a split second, and the only reason he wasn't in the car too was because he was at work. They were in a brand new car. It was officially blamed on excessive speed. The corner was a weird one. You kind of go under the small but solid concrete bridge, through a slight S-bend, while also going down and up a slight hill. Not really dangerous unless you're speeding. I don't know what happened to the poor guy. This was approximately a decade ago and I was only a teenager myself. I just remember never seeing him at work again. My neighbor knocked on the front door early one morning. We'd never met. He introduced himself and wanted me to know why there might be a lot of cars parked in front of the house. All three of his children had died in a car accident the night before. One of my friends was playing online with me when I hear a knock on his door through the mic. His parents walk in and decide to tell them that he is adopted and that they are getting a divorce. All in one go. No emotional breaks or anything, and my friend just breaks down over the mic as his parents walk out. Yep. At least several times a month we had to take care of a family who learned that their child had cancer that day. Pretty terrible, life-altering news. I spent a lot of time distracting kids with board games and coloring while their parents were talking to doctors, crying, and then amazingly pulling it together to continue on. I knew a guy who, within the same 24 hours, learned that his wife of 7 years was pregnant with someone else's child. His wife was filing for divorce, and she was going to try to get their house to herself because she was the primary signer on their mortgage, because his credit wasn't so hot. That was brutal to see. A girl in my class got caught with a thermos full of vodka, and when the teacher caught her, she got sent to the principal's office. Well, when the principal asked her why she was drinking, the girl told him that she had been sleeping with the school resource officer. Dude was a cop stationed at the school, having sex with a 10th grader. Got dragged out of the school by officers that worked alongside him. At the court hearing they found out he was having sex with 2 more girls at the school. His wife and 2 kids were in the courtroom to support him because he told them he was innocent. That kinda caved when one of the girls had a video of the 2 of them having sex. When I was about 13 I was talking with my best friend at a playground on a hill. Suddenly this lady comes racing down on her bike. She's not wearing a helmet, which was unfortunate because her bike slipped from underneath her and she goes flying, smacks her head into a corner. I was too young to know this at the time, but I'm almost certain she died instantly. Wear a helmet. I did it. Boss had produced kiddie porn. It disturbed me so much I spoke with a friend who was a desk sergeant the town over and asked what could be done. He passed word along to the chief of the town where it was happening. 2 days later the biggest cop I've ever seen walked through the door of our shop and asked to see everyone's ID. Cuffed and stuffed. You should have seen his face when I was summoned to testify at the grand jury hearing. This whole thing has been sort of cleansing for me. I've never spoken about it to anyone other than my wife, who supported my decision to become a jobless college student with a family and mortgage. Some people are saying I'm a hero. I'm not, I'm just a person. The real heroes in this thread are the ones that lived through situations like this and continued on. Maybe reach out to some of them and ask if they're okay. Let them know that they are important, respected and most of all a valued member of our community. I keep getting asked how I found out and I've answered it on a few occasions and got a bit rude to one individual. Apologies. I was approached by the victim and they asked for help. I helped. This was a few years ago. I work in a hospital. Got notified a large trauma was coming in. A minivan got struck by a drunk driver with a grandpa, aunt, and 3 kids under 10. The aunt survived. The kids came to my hospital, one dead on arrival and the other 2 we couldn't save. Kept them on life support until the parents got there to say goodbye. I'm always going to remember the sound of the mom singing to them. She lost all her kids and her dad in one day. Have a friend whose boss got into a gnarly car accident a week ago. Today she was officially told she's paralyzed from the waist down. She was also notified today that her husband died, non-car accident related. I don't know exactly why he passed, but to go from a happy life with your soulmate to not being able to walk and have no life partner is something I can imagine recovering soon from. My stepdad's life was ruined the day his son, my brother, died. He couldn't cope with the loss, couldn't comprehend the rest of us were hurting just as bad, and turned even deeper into the alcohol and became even more emotionally abusive. Couple years later, when he forced my mom to choose him or me, I watched her make the hardest decision I've probably ever seen her make. She walked away from her husband, the love of her life. My mother and I no longer have much of a relationship. She made the right choice for the wrong reason. She has point blank told me she regrets having me. My stepdad is, as far as I know, still drunk off his butt and living alone. My mother is alone and living with regrets. As for me, I'm still healing from the scars but mostly doing okay. I am still processing my mother's words. I do not take the blame she tried to place on me. I do not feel that I am a mistake. I know that her feelings or problems are not my fault. I know I am here for a reason, even if I don't know what it is. I had a former colleague who was doing his residency in general surgery. He had just started his 5th and final year of training. One day, in the middle of a surgical case, the police show up at the hospital for him. A tech pulled him out of the OR, and he was arrested right there on the spot in front of everybody, still in most of his surgical attire. He had to do the walk of shame through the entire hospital, in handcuffs and OR scrubs. Turns out his ex-wife had gone to the police claiming that he had molested their children. The children testified to this effect as well. All of us were blown away. This was the sweetest, most cheerful guy ever. Nobody thought him capable of something like this. Sure enough, it came out several months later that the kids' statements were coerced and that his ex-wife falsified the whole thing. It wasn't the first time she had attempted to screw him over, but it was definitely the most successful. Dude's career and life were messed up. I grew up best friends with my sister and one day she didn't come home from work. I was 16 at the time, she was 22. I heard my parents start to rumble around the house turning the lights on and I could hear more commotion and panic. The cops had called our house because they found my sister's car damaged on a street in the middle of a neighborhood with the driver's side door still open and they found one of her shoes was in the middle of the street. The next morning, still no sister. She worked as a bartender. She left work that night and some guy followed her, sideswiped her car and when she got out to swap insurance, he kidnapped her and put her in his truck and drove off. That night he continued abusing her, besides doing other horrible things to her that I don't want to mention, and held her captive through the night and into the next day. My sister managed to escape the next day and run to the nearest house, banging on the doors. The homeowners let my sister in and called 911, they could tell she had been beaten and attacked. She was taken to the hospital, which is when we got the phone call where she was. She had 2 broken ribs, her face was nearly black and blue, both black eyes, and scratches all over her body. After that I've never had my sister back. She survived the attack but she suffers horrible anxiety and panic attacks. She can't go out in public alone. She drinks heavily and is terrified to move out of my mom's and live alone. I just used to look up to her and we would laugh and watch movies and bounce on the trampoline and she would drive me to try local food chains and we would listen to music. And ever since I've never had my big sister back. I'll always love her, but it breaks my heart. In one day her life changed for the worst. When I was in EMT school we were told about a paramedic student, instructor was a paramedic as well, who observed a stabbing call. They arrive at the bar and see a dude with a knife in his abdomen. Medic student takes lead and pulls the knife out, something you never do as I'm sure you know. Senior medic loses his mind at this dumbass, asking him what the hell he was thinking. Student freaks out and, you guessed it, puts the knife back in. The patient died as a result. Student lost any chance of having a good job, not even just in EMS, and was charged with the death of the patient. Might have been manslaughter, I don't remember. His entire life was ruined because he freaked out and made a mistake on a call, not a rookie mistake or a common slip-up, but in about half a minute he ruined his life. My elderly father unwittingly married a woman who would abuse him for 4.5 years before we found out. We met her on the day of the wedding. That day sealed his fate. She isolated him from us, coerced him to sell his assets, stripped his bank accounts, heavily drugged him and almost killed him. But we rescued him and he lived with us until he died. Not my personal experience but a national news story. A van full of college students got into an accident and most of them died, but one girl survived with major injuries. She had facial trauma and was hospitalized for weeks. She kept repeating another girl's name as she was recovering. Turns out, she was saying her own name. She and another similarly built, same hair and eye-colored female passenger were mistakenly identified for each other in the aftermath of the crash. Her family had a funeral for her, and the other girl's family were the ones at her bedside before the misidentification was realized. I cannot even imagine the suffering of thinking your daughter was alive for weeks and then learning she'd been dead all along, or having a funeral for a child who was actually alive and you didn't know. Thanks for listening to Radio TTS. Hit the subscribe button and activate the notification bell for more videos like this. And please share your own stories where people got their life to be ruined in one day.